When you insert a graphic into your documents here, you're sometimes going to insert it right into a line of text like we have here. So we have this rather long document selected, and we've got the insertion point set right after the first, actually the second comma of our paragraph 2 here. And what we're going to do is we're going to insert a shape, and we're going to see how that affects the rest of the text around it. We're going to look at our text wrapping options in this module here. So let's start out and let's just simply use some of the lessons that we learned earlier on in this chapter, and let's insert something that like a piece of smart art, and that will hopefully give us a shape to work around here. Let's do a pyramid. Let's do something like that, an inverted pyramid. So this one's rather large here, so let's whittle it down here, so just give me a moment. And so we end up with something like this. Now, I want you to notice what's happening here as I'm dealing with this shape. It is acting as if it's another piece of, just another character in the document. Let me scale it down just a little bit more. When you insert a shape, when you insert a graphic into your document, the default behavior is that that graphic is going to be in line with text. So in other words, if you just look at the insertion point here as I just go across with the arrow, it's going to go bing, 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 and then boom, over to the letter W over here. So that whole graphic that I just inserted, that thing, just think of it as another character that's in your paragraph, just like the letter W, just like the letter R that precedes it. So when that's the case, there's not going to be any text that appears to the left or to the right of that particular element that you've added. So let's look what happens just if I reselect the insertion point just with clicking and dragging. Notice you see the little insertion point, I don't know what to call it, the cursor looks like that. So when I move it, the text will move, accommodate it as appropriate. And once again, notice that there will not be text living to the right of this thing, at least as it is inserted right now. What can we do to change that? Well, when you select the graphic that you've added, you should get your tools, either your drawing tools or in this case your smart art tools, and then you should look for a format tab in whatever tools pop up depending on the graphic that you're working with. And you should see something like this, an arrangement grouping here, and you should get under the arrangement grouping a text wrapping selection, and that's of course what we want to be working with. We'll change the way that the text wraps around the selected object. So what we have, again, the default is that it's in line with text. It will move with the text. So again, what that means here, and I think once you see it in action, you have a better understanding of some of the options if you just know what the default is. If I start to add words to the document, notice that as I type, that piece of graphics, that piece of art is going to move around depending on if I backspace or if I add words. It is going to be in line with the text. I think I've beaten that horse enough now, so we'll move on to some of the other options we have. Once again, select the graphic, go to your tools, whatever tools load up in the ribbon here, format, and then arrange text wrapping, and now you have other options: square, tight, behind text, in front of text, top and bottom, through, and then of course more advanced layout options. Now, as you look at some of these options, I think most of them are pretty self-explanatory. I think most of the time either behind text, square, or tight are going to be some of your options, or maybe even through. It just depends on how close you want that text to be to the graphic that is included in that text. For example, like the square builds kind of a general white space around whatever graphic you're inserting. Tight reduces that white space, especially at the top and at the bottom. So if I click on tight here, let's just see how that's going to look. And this is mostly a process of trial and error here. So that tight brings in the text as much as possible to kind of hug that graphic that's in the document. So beyond that, there's really not a whole lot else to say besides that it just really comes down to a process of trial and error. Notice that once again, if I choose that tight wrapping option, I can still have the ability to move the insertion point of the graphic that I've inserted, and depending on where I let go, where I set my insertion points, the other parts of the text will adjust as appropriate. And again, I can have the text, the graphic completely behind, and then it really doesn't matter because the text is treated kind of as a layer and it's not going to move no matter where I put that graphic. Now, there's a couple more options that I want to spend a few moments talking about, so we'll do that in the next module. But at least you know now how to get started with dealing with the text and how it's going to flow in and around and over the graphic that you've inserted.